سوليد والشيء الحظ كله طرح بمكانه. اهدى ما هو كل شي باين في المحنة. الله بيشهد مين احنا رجالة ضمن طرطش لك بنضرب حرب الليلة ما بنغلب. بدك شبال وعادي منهد لك مرحب فيك في ولاد القدس مندبر حالنا نحل اللغز. رنيت على نفحة وكل بخش وقت شفنا وياما وكله بصف ولا مرة نخاف ولا مرة ونص. بدك بركان بنبقع بنعمل لك حفلة تخش تنط نستقطب مال بس بدنا نقص. ما هو كله عارف ما هو كله شايف ما هو كله خايف والدنيا ترص. استجدع دايما ووعك بوحش انا ادرينالين فاجع بشباب ينضرب الغاز. احنا الجدعان مش زي نجلين رد بالك عم تعيشها بليش. سوي واعمل واجمع كاش ما الدنيا صعيبة وبدها سلام. سيبك من روح واحضر لك جاي انا قرش انا قرش انا قرش انا سمكة وصحابي ملان في الجلمة. مش نعمل غلبة تجينا يا خالي بناخد العتبة تخف بالليل ندوي لك عتمة بس شوف تنساش. انا زي النو سلاح فتاك في بغز رجال تحفر انفاق ترجع بشوال وملينا اشلاء. بلاجين 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 بالجدع انا فاتح دكان من بيع شلسات والدم مسموح بس للسباع مكتوب على القرمة. لو غاد احنا جن بنطلع ما بتشوفناش ودموع ما تسيل اذا فش مسيل نحن الشجعان. ان قد انا اوانه وبنبخ وطني بيع ميزانه وكيف بس عرف صوت وسولاد والشيل حط كله طرح بمكانه. وان قد انا اوانه وبنبخ وطني بيع ميزانه وكيف بس عرف صوت وسولاد والشيل حط كله طرح بمكانه.
حكمت من الرعب من الارض نطلع زي الجن بخ ادي اللعب على هذا نترك على النار الافكار تنطخ تراب ورا حدا اذا بلغ انا مش مركب بركبش مع حدا انا بين ان امكن.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to the hybrid 14th Toronto Palestine Film Festival. I'm Dani Majid and I'm part of the programming committee. We are very excited that you are joining us today for this wonderful panel. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the Toronto Palestine Film Festival and all our events, online and otherwise, are hosted on the traditional territory of multiple nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. This territory is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. We are very proud to be hosting today's panel with Rabét. The panel was inspired by this spring's uprising and the role that art and artists played in mobilizing solidarity around the world through their work and their activism. And we are thrilled to have these amazing powerhouses with us to talk about their work in their respective fields. Today's event will be moderated by Maysa. Maysa is the Digital Communications Manager at Rabét and the PIPD. Rabét is the digital platform of the Palestine Institute for Public Diplomacy. It is a digital space for Palestine by Palestinians. It celebrates the beauty and diversity of the Palestinian identity, society, culture, food, art, and politics, while challenging the systems of oppression and injustices that Palestinians face. Be sure to visit tpff.ca and check out our wonderful merchandise designed by our wonderful graphic designer Sama Al-Zanoun all available on our website. And be sure to check out all our other amazing films and programs, including the virtual art show on our website called Rebel Landscapes. And on Sunday, we have the Sahtain Deluxe Block Party. So there will be amazing, wonderful food and music, and of course, Debki and Kanafa. And afterwards, on Sunday, after the screening of The Present, we'll be joined in conversation with director-producer Anne-Marie Jasser. So please be sure to get all your tickets while they're still available. They're going fast. Let us know what you think of today's panel or the other events you're attending at TPFF, and share your favorite moments with us by tagging us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook using hashtag TPFF2020. So we can see your post and experience your moments with us. You can also join our online newsletter to get our updates directly. TPFF is completely volunteer-run, a nonprofit organization. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors, including our government sponsors, the Ontario Arts Council and the Toronto Arts Council, and our gold sponsors, Penny Appeal Canada, Medical Aid for Palestine, and GFA Realty Inc. Without them and our other amazing donors, big and small, this festival wouldn't be possible. And finally, thank you so much to our wonderful audience for your unwavering support and being with us today. So we really hope you enjoyed the panel, and I'd love to turn it over to Maysa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dania, for the great introduction, and thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. I'm very excited and honored to be moderating this conversation and this panel with four fantastic artists whose work is integral to in many fields. So I'm going to give brief introductions to everyone. So for those joining us, please feel free to share in the comments where you're joining from, just so that we have an idea where everyone is coming in from. And as we have the conversation, please feel free to also add any questions that you may have, so that we can field some questions at the very end. As Dania said, this panel was inspired by the uprising that happened from April throughout June and the rest of the summer, where many Palestinians were taking to digital platforms to express how they were feeling. And a lot of that meant that art became a tool and became centered within the conversations that we were having about Palestine and about Jerusalem. And so we're honored to have our four panelists with us today. We're going to be having we have Mariam Barghouti, who is a writer and a poet who's joining us from Ramallah. Mariam has been having some technical issues, so we hope that she'll be able to join us. We'll see how that goes. We also have Malak, who's a painter and a visual artist from based in Gaza. Maysa, who's a musician, songwriter, and singer, who's joining us from Haifa. And last but not least, Razan, who's a filmmaker and artist who's based in Montreal. And so just to start us off, I think I'm going to call on Malak, because Malak is actually in a rush to travel, right, Malak? So she might be leaving us in 15 minutes, but we're still glad to have you for how many ever minutes that we can have you for. And I'm just going to get us started up. If you can tell us a little bit about what you think art's role is in activism, or activism in art, how they feed into each other, and how you relate to that in your own personal work. And then we'll go around to Razan and then Maysa. So yeah, the platform's yours, Malak.
Thank you, Maysa, and thank you for having me. I have to start by saying that I'm a big fan of Maysa, Razan, and Mariam work, and also the work that you guys do in the festival. First off, I would really love to start by saying how I became an artist, because this is a major it's a major point to make before starting to speak about activism and art. So I'm 21, and I so far survived 4 Israeli assaults, because I lived in Gaza until I was 17. And then I came for a vacation in Gaza. Then I became another assault survivor. So I was 14 years old. I come from a very artistic family. We love poetry, art, and music. So I grew up knowing that art is a self-expression, but I didn't start practicing till during the 51 days attack in 2014. So I started as a kid trying to express myself. I expressed the suffocation of living under siege. I expressed the horrific scenes I saw during the attack, of the murder of our neighbors and the devastation of my neighborhood. I also painted about my life as a woman under the occupation, under siege, and also under patriarchy, which is something that really I speak about in my art. So I started putting my artwork online, and I started realizing how much people wanted to really know through the artwork I posted. So I started communicating with people through my artwork, and that was really a turning point. And this was like the main point, that people really got emotionally interacting with the artwork, and it encouraged them to learn more about the cause. And that's why I traveled all over the world to exhibit with my artwork and to tell my story, which is very important, so as all Palestinian people's stories. So art and activism, I started doing the activism with time. I didn't really have this intention. I didn't know what activism is. So I started feeling that art was a way of telling my story, and I did. And then after this, I realized that when one talks about their stories in art, this makes one which is called Artivism, which is art in combination with activism. So I do feel that art by itself is very powerful, and when it has a strong cause, it becomes really changing, and it really makes a huge turn in people's mind. Because as a student of political science, I'm a strong believer of the strength of the political argument. But also as an artist, I realized that both the political argument and also art work perfectly together into to really grabbing the attention of people to support and to also show solidarity uh, for Palestine and also for other causes.
Absolutely, and that's very powerful. And Malak, since we have you for a short period of time, I want to ask. I think we're going to share your Instagram and your online platform with people, but your main form of expression online is through your the pictures that you put together or that you graphically design. Is that right? I wonder if you how you interact with that community, and if you feel any pressure to put your identity into the art, and instances where you would rather, separate the two in some way.
Well, the thing is, as an artist, I do things from the heart. So as long as I feel this kind of pressure, I know I'm not supposed to do it. But growing up in a very conflict, uh, in a war zone and in a place where it's really complicated, and growing up with hearing things like murders, resistance, and another war arriving, and so I grew up in not a very peaceful place. So art was my only way of understanding my surrounding and understanding my community. But I don't really feel this type of pressure. I feel it's more as self-expression, but also as a responsibility for someone who has a platform, for someone who has audience, to share their stories and to also help advocate for the rights of other people who don't have the exact platform or exact language that one can connect with. So yeah, I hope this answers your question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Malak. Razan, Maysa, maybe Razan, I'll pull you in to sort of talk about your own experience with that, and then Maysa, we'll get you in there too.
Yeah, shukran Malak. And thank you, TPFF. Thank you, Maysa. Hi, Maysa. So, I mean, Malak already, I think, answered the question very eloquently. But maybe it's good to situate the question in my positionality here as a Palestinian exilee on stolen land, right? So if I situate the question, and I say exilee, right, because my paperwork says I'm a Palestinian refugee, but I always remind myself that we didn't seek refuge anywhere. Honestly, we were expelled, and so it's good. In Arabic, it's shatat, so it's very clear, and manfa, so it's very clear. But in I think we've been kind of categorized and legalized by the settler colonial project already by calling us refugees. So to situate this as a Palestinian exilee, this question as Palestinian exilee on stolen land here in so-called Canada. I think, art from this colonial perspective is usually, and we're surrounded by this, is usually kind of, the work process is very linear here, predominantly, right? And how it's dominantly practiced is very linear. You get an idea, and then you have this illusion of infinite resources, and it's a very extractionist process where you're provided these resources, and then you execute this idea that's in your brain. And I feel like for us, it's not about us. It's a bigger question where the individual becomes part of a collectivity. And so it comes out, I think, of two things to kind of contrast it with that colonial process of making art. I think, first of all, it comes out of pure necessity, just like Malak said, and for me here, and for, I guess, art making in exile, there are a few necessities. One is the necessity to return to Palestine. And that's a very real need that my parents are from Haifa, actually, Maysa. So there's this need to return, and sometimes this takes the form of a digital return. In my work, for example, or in meeting Maysa, today, we met before, but like meeting and talking to Maysa about Haifa is another way of returning. So that takes many forms, and again, and the second necessity is intersecting with other struggles, decolonial struggles on this stolen land, because you're put in this positionality where you live in an Israel 500 years after the fact, and everything is normalized, the nation state is normalized, and you have to denormalize Canada as much as we denormalize Israel. So that becomes another major necessity. And I mean, the third necessity that comes also as a contrast to this illusion of infinite resources is community. Like I need to also keep my feet on the ground here and see other people and other Palestinians, other people of color who are sharing in my struggle, indigenous peoples are sharing in my struggle. And so community becomes a huge part of the art making process. This is where it compensates for resources, or even intentionally, not seeking out funding, not seeking out the typical resources, but talking, making art through the community that you build. Art as becomes a kind of an emergence from that process, and it becomes part and parcel of the decolonization process. So you don't really have to push it there, like you don't have to even theorize it there. It's there. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I see Mariam has joined us. Hi, Mariam. We're happy to have you with us.
I'm really happy to be here. I'm so sorry I'm late. Internet issues. I had to come somewhere else.
It's okay, no worries at all. We're glad you were able to join. So we got started, warmed up a little bit on the topic. Malak and Razan have already shared, what their art or their form of art means to them in terms of activism, how the two play into each other. I think, Razan, the point you shared about community is so important, and we'll delve more into that, especially with, digital platforms becoming way more politicized, used for activism than ever before. Maysa, I'd love to hear your perspective through your own, whatever forms of expression, and then also through your work in terms of music and what that means to you, to be able to put that through the activism lens.
Well, hi, أولاً مرحبا. Thank you, Malak and Razan and Maysa and Mariam, مرحبا. And so what I wanted to share is, for me, I started, it came from a different side. For me, I remember myself always singing and always knowing that I want to do music. Even before I knew anything else. Pretty much, ever since I was really maybe a month-old, or I don't know, whenever I started making sounds. And I actually learned more and more about the reality that we live in through the process of making music. And like you said, I'm based in Haifa. I was born and raised in Haifa, and I had the privilege, let's call it, to not have to be aware of the situation that we live in, because you don't feel it as much in Haifa. I had the option to only really learn about it when I became maybe 13, 14, about what it means really to be a Palestinian, what it really means to be a woman Palestinian, what it means, all of these things. And Malak, you said something that you didn't know. You started doing this before you knew what activism is. And I think this is a subject that I've been thinking about a lot lately, also about, being Palestinian and all of that. And that's the question, to when we label it as activism and when we label it as this is what we do. Because like Malak, you had no other choice, or let's say not a lot of choices. And I don't know if I would put that under activism, because you're not living peacefully and trying to change something and whatever it is. So you go on a demonstration. This is the life that you live. And for me, the moment that I realized this, it's also about, being Palestinian. I live here, I hold an Israeli ID. So it's always the question when someone asks where you're from, especially if it's an Israeli person, where you're from. So I say, I'm a Palestinian, I'm from Haifa. And then there always comes the question of, but you're holding an Israeli ID. How can you be Palestinian? Why are you talking politics? And my answer was always, because politics is a part of my life. And then I realized only like a week ago, less maybe, that if I'm speaking that I'm Palestinian, I'm not speaking politics, I'm saying what I am. And we're so used to making this life that we're living as something that that we choose to take and speak about and talk about. So we need to be activists to do it, or we need to be this and that to do it, or we need to be political to do it. And I've never in my life talked politics. I don't talk about Bibi. I don't talk about Knesset. I don't talk about, that's not what I talk about. I talk about how I live under this situation and under this reality and under the occupation, and being in Haifa, which is very different than growing up in Ramallah or growing up in Gaza or growing up in Shatat. And this is really, like, I think this is a switch that is really important for me to be able to talk about, because when you label something that you have no other choice of, it's kind of dehumanizing to the reality that we live in. And I think that's really important. And so for me, I started doing music out of feeling, because this is what I like to do. I like to sing, I like to play guitar, I love the tunes, I love to listen to music and all of that. And with time, it became more and more centered to the reality. And really, like, for me, art and music in general is a very, very, although it's really wide and public, and the minute I release a song, it's out there and anybody can hear it. But for me, it's something that is really, really very personal, because what makes these songs, like, people hear the songs, but they don't see the months and months and years sometimes of trying to figure out in your head what you actually feel about this specific thing that you want to talk about. And then people don't. So for me, being in that place, holding an Israeli ID, not being able to travel to any of the Arab countries, not being able to travel somewhere because I would be represented as an Israeli, and I don't want that. And other places they won't let me because there's an Israeli party or this and that, or my passport, and all of that. So actually being in music actually made me understand more and more about my specific reality, and the reality of people that live a similar thing,
Maysa, you've mentioned such important points, about the definition of activism, what it means to really be political when, your life and your identity has been politicized in a way that makes you feel, you have to separate the personal from the so-called political, and just the human process of taking in the fact that you as a human being, your craft, your talent, that you were born with is now being, an integral tool to being part of a community and understanding that. But we'll delve more into that. Mariam, I'd love to hear about your own work, as a writer, as a poet, as an, activist, if we want to use the term, on your process. Yeah.
Thank you, Maysa. And Mace, and everyone here. Honestly, I just want to take a moment and say this is such a dope crew, and it's really, really nice to be a part of this. I'm actually the opposite of Maysa. So I got into everything through politics, through speaking about, the things like, the elections that are never going to happen, and the dictatorship that we live under, and the settler colonialism that we experience. But other than that I learned about art as something that is political. That was my introduction to art. I was introduced to life as the personal as the political. You cannot divide it. I cannot, if I tried, divide it. Everything I say, everything I do is political by inheritance. I'm Palestinian, period. The discrimination I experience is because of that. The laudatory claps I experience is because of that, or despite of that, I suppose. And for me, it's realizing all of it is a form of expression and communication. And any large-scale revolutions that ever took place were also preceded or followed up by things like music, things like visual arts. And that's because we're diverse, and we find different ways of expressing. But again, in the end, to, I guess, repeat what my colleagues again said, is there is only your life, right? And you're trying to live it with dignity, that you cannot separate anything you do from that. But for me, unlike beginning as a journalist or a reporter and a writer, or being in the politics, I at least realized art allows you to be creative. It allows you to be innovative. It allows you to imagine things that people tell you don't. And that's for me the difference in them.
That's so true. And Mariam, I relate a lot to what you say, because just to share a little bit about myself, I'm Palestinian refugee from 1948, born in Amman, Jordan. During the months of April to May to June, when everybody was, talking about Palestine online, I actually felt so well placed. I don't know if that's a term, but I felt so with the community like I've never felt before. And I felt like during that time we transcended so many of the disconnections that we were feeling. And then suddenly expressing yourself through art, and art being about identity and being about displacement or war or whatever oppression that we're experiencing, it became okay to do that and to be that. So I'd love to hear from all of you about what that sense of community, if you felt it, meant to you, because I think for me that was like a turning point in how I perceive, sharing my art, or the online digital communities that we've created through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or other platforms, and what that means to each of you personally and through your work. Because I remember during that time, I used to have a limit on my screen time, and I would limit it to like 4 hours a day. And during those months, my time went up to 14 hours a day. My mom would have to snatch my phone away from me. Malak, I'll start with you, since we know you have a place to be in a bit. Malak, I think you're on mute.
All right, is it my turn? I lost you at the end.
Yes. I was just saying, if you can share with us what that time meant for you, and what, in general, community through your art and your platforms looks like and means to you.
Yeah. So I grew up feeling very disconnected. In the Gaza Strip, I learned that I'm a refugee, and I learned so much about the geography of Palestine and the history of Palestine, and about Jerusalem and what it's famous for, about Jaffa and what's famous for, and the trade throughout the history. But then I was struck at the fact that I can't really visit any of these places, and I can't really meet Palestinians who live just a few kilometers away from me. So this reality has really created this thing in me that I don't know what the other side of my country looks like or seems like. So when I was 15, I got the chance to have a group exhibition with other Palestinian artists. And here comes the surprise. I was like, wow, we just live so close, but it feels like we both live in different planets. And I realized this from the arts. I realized this from the themes of the arts. So you realize that some artists, they paint about the apartheid wall. Some artists paint about racism. Other artists paint about the occupation. So I felt how much we are connected in a way, but also disconnected and fragmented, also because of the occupation and how much it tries to separate us. And a big example of it is the Gaza Strip and its siege since for 15 years. So I felt in the last attack, and with all this big movements, and with the attention that in the social media, I did felt there was kind of connection. I did felt reminded of the same one cause that we are all fighting for, which is the Palestinian cause, which is liberation. But in a way, I still feel like when I lived in Istanbul, and I'm just traveling today to Istanbul, I lived with two girls from Jerusalem, my age, and I felt like, wow, like we speak differently, we make food differently, they make makluba differently. So I felt like, in a way, like, fuck the occupation. Like I wanted to meet these people, and I didn't need, like, I want to have makluba from Yafa, for example. So it's all these simple things that I started realizing of how much the occupation is trying to disconnecting us. So making art was a way for me to feel more close, but I will only really feel close as long as I can go back and forth to all these to Palestinian cities. But yeah, I hope this answered your question.
You're on mute, Maysa.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mariam. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, no, Malak, that did answer the question, and that's on point. That's exactly what being, understanding your community feels like. Razan, would you like to chime in and share with us?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, to situate this in the latest, I can't even describe it. It's kind of like increase in violence all across Palestine in May and June. I think the disconnection there, yani Malak was talking about disconnection. Definitely, I share the same disconnection of kind of longing to meet and be with Palestinians everywhere. And I also grew up in Beirut, and I always think about the idea that like people in Haifa and people in Beirut are looking at the same sea. So kind of. We share the same horizon, and it's a 3-hour drive, but somehow it's also impossible to get there through the colonial border. And so, yeah, the disconnection I felt there and at that time and here is that I would be online, kind of like you, consuming social media for 14 hours a day. And watching Gaza burn again, and then going outside and in the summer in so-called Canada, and it's all normal, right? Everything, life is going on, and moving on, and very happily. It's a cold country, so the summer people go crazy here. So there are layers of normalcy that you have to kind of break through, and it was important to drink from the social media. This is my access to my people and my country everywhere. And when I say country, I'm not talking about nation state. I'm not talking about dawla. I'm talking about Palestine everywhere, and every person, and everywhere, literally. Sophia Azib says Palestine as flesh. Like we carry Palestine in our bodies, and so. That was my access to my people and what's happening to them at that time. But at the same time, it's crippling, right? You can't just sit on your phone. It was literally crippling because I couldn't move for a while because of how much I was looking at my phone for such a long time. Yeah. So I had to go outside and break the normalcy, and this is where again you come. The art comes out of necessity. So here's where when you tap into your community and you organize demonstrations, but also your art comes into this. I wrote a slam poem a long time ago, and Stefan Christoph, who is an organizer here, brought together indigenous and BIPOC and Palestinian poets and writers to tell the spoken, use spoken word to bring that into public spaces. We had a microphone in front of a metro station, and we were all speaking. And this is where also art becomes very expansive, right? Like I remember Huda Adra from the Palestine Oral History Archive Project, coming in and reading, reading an interview from a Palestinian 1948 grandmother talking about being expelled in that moment. And so like art becomes expansive. Who is an artist becomes very expansive. Art and activism kind of become blurred. I remember at that time, okay, I have a slam poem, I'm gonna use that. I have films. People were contacting me to share my films. Okay, here are my films, It was also a moment where, the word kind of intersectional takes on intersectionality with other peoples of this land, other struggles that are happening here. And this is where you expand your kind of base of solidarity, and so that collectively we can break through that normalcy of settler colonialism here in so-called Canada, to talk about Palestine as well, and talk about settler colonialism as a structure, global structure, but also, intersectionality in art. Like, what is art becomes very expansive, and you use everything that you have to kind of denormalize.
Yeah, absolutely. Razan, I completely agree, and I want to, keep going with this theme that you left us off with, but we're going to get back to Malak really quickly because she has to head off. So Malak, we want to thank you so much for joining us, even with the few minutes that you had. Any final words that you have to share? We'd love to hear it, about, your own experience and the limitations of creating art in Gaza in specific. The platform is yours if you're with us. I think Malak just left. تمام, مش مشكلة, that's okay. If she rejoins, that's great. If not, we'll leave Malak's information in the comment section so you can follow her and follow her work. Hi Malak, you're back. I think you're on mute, Malak, but we'd love to hear from you. Any final words before you head out? I think you mentioned wanting to share what creating art and the limitations of art is in Gaza. So we'd love to hear that before we have to let you go. Okay. I think Malak video is frozen. So, okay, let's just keep going, and then once Malak is able to join, we'll have her speak. But Maysa, I would love to hear how your experience has been with building community online.
I think Malak just came back though.
Is she back?
I think so. And she unmuted herself, so maybe we just check for a sec if she
Yeah.
Malak هون؟
ملك هلا رح نصير نغني لك، وينك؟
هيني
اوكي good.
يعني الحظ لحقني بغزة النت سيء ومصر سيء.
اوكي ولا يهمك.
بس هلا سامعيني منين؟ شو كان السؤال مايس؟ سوري ما سمعت ولا شيء.
لا ولا يهمك. We were just saying, just if you have any final things to share with us all, or maybe specifically about, your experience in creating art in Gaza, what that means and the limitations that you experience.
Yes, sure. So when I did my art during the attack and before and after, it felt so impossible. Like making art felt very odd. For so many reasons. First, during the attack, the only main art store in the Gaza Strip was demolished in a very active neighborhood. So that was devastating because it felt like it's the end of something. It's the end of a freedom inside me. But then during the attack, I started thinking, because during 2014, this is the time I started making sketches for more like having this self-expression and trying to discharge the negativity and the overwhelming feelings I got while I was under attack, and especially after the murder of my neighbor who was just one block away. So in 2000, like this attack, it felt so different because I was more mature. I realized what is exactly going around me. So I felt that documenting art was so important. I did so many sketches of real stories of a family who lost, like a family who got wiped off, Talibani family. One street, my school street, that got destroyed, including two families that got completely killed, who my mom knows. So I felt that in a way I had to sketch, but I was also so torn because I didn't know whether I'm going to do it to survive or not. Because the last attack, although it was only 11 days, it was the worst, and it felt so close to death than any other attack. But anyway, speaking about the limitations, since the attack of May, the canvas, which is the main and most important art material, has been banned from entry. So the canvas is more like the art cloth that artists use and stretch on frames to start putting their medium on. And also some colors like black and white, some colors as orange, has also been banned for a certain amount of time. And one interesting thing, every time I ship an original artwork, I go to the mail. We have one mail called Marrakesh. And although he knows my face, he keeps telling me, make sure the artwork is not political, otherwise it will be confiscated. And every time I go there, I tell him, all right, I will not paint political things. So, but it feels like, although I don't paint very implicit political patterns, but it felt so limiting that there's like an officer or an office that is viewing my artwork before having it sent to the house of the new house. And also in 2016, I applied to have another, so like a group exhibitions with other artists from different parts of Palestine, and I was banned entry. I would like my permission to go and attend this exhibition
Yeah.
was banned without any reason. So there's so many limitations. Like one thing I needed to add is about the ceasefire, because in the Gaza Strip, I don't feel that we have a ceasefire. But anyway, when we had it at 3, I remember 2 a.m. in the morning, we had the ceasefire announced in TVs. And at this time, I felt like, okay, I'm not going to be killed. But after 11 days of not being able to get some sleep, the only thing that were not allowing me to sleep at the day of the ceasefire was the sound of the drones, the sound of more like a military planes that make like a really annoying sound of the NSIC B, like this sound that is really difficult. So I ask myself, like, how can art not be political when I hear this sound, the sound of the drones, higher than my inner voice? Because it keeps
Yeah.
24/7, like this disturbing and also interrupting one thoughts. So I feel that making art is really resistance. Not it doesn't necessarily resist the occupation, but you resist the unbearable life that the occupation designed for you. So I try to, every time I make art, I just feel like I'm making something important because of the difficulty of the places that the artwork are being made in. So sorry for speaking for so long.
Oh no, please do not apologize. No, thank you so much, Malak. That's very powerful, and I think what you share just shows we feel frustration when we are censored online, as we rightfully should,
Yeah.
through online media platforms. But the reality for many Palestinians on the ground is that they're censored directly in many forms, in many ways that are violent, and that is basic discrimination against their ethno-national identity. Like what you say, you can't have basic artist materials or colors, or you can't draw what you want to draw because it might be labeled as political. There are censorships and limitations on who you can share your art with, who you can send it to, what it can mean. and all of that is not even considering the violence that you're situated within. So I think, this very much touches upon what Maysa was saying about activism and art, and what really activism has come to be known as, when so many of us have just naturally gone to that form of art as a way of expression. Malak, thank you so much. Again, it was so valuable to have you on here with us all. I'm sure Maysa and Razan and Mariam were so glad to have you.
شكرا ملك.
شكرا
Thank you
كثير
very
ملك.
much, Maysa, Razan, and Mariam. It's such a pleasure to be with you and hear you speak. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with
توصلوا
everything,
بالسلامة.
with Istanbul and all of that.
إيه. تروحي وترجع بالسلامة.
Yeah.
Thanks, Malak. I think we lost Mariam.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Malak. I think we've lost Mariam, but maybe this is a good transition into talking about the limitations both of you experience in creating your art, whether it's internally from the art community or externally from the environments that you're placed in. Maysa, I don't know if you got to speak about your experience. I think you did with community, but yeah, I'd love to hear about the limitations you experience.
Well, I didn't share about the community, but it's all good. We can go to
yeah, please start with that. Sorry, I think I get
all good.
I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
I'll keep it really short and connected directly, of course, to the last events that happened. And I just want to share that for me, it was the first time that I didn't feel like a stranger. And it was, well, I've realized with the years how smart the system is in dividing Palestinians and people in general, and smart in general, but specifically speaking about dividing Palestinians. I remember that until 4 or 5 years ago, you wouldn't really see anybody talking in any place about Palestinians living inside the Israeli borders holding an Israeli ID. I think the first time I actually saw that on a screen, it was through Tamer's film, Junction 48. That was the first time that I see someone talking about this reality. And I remember we were in a car, me and Tamer, before the movie was released. And we were talking about this conversation. And I remember how ashamed I was that I hold an Israeli ID. And I wouldn't speak about it publicly because I felt that it somehow makes me less of a Palestinian. Because I'm holding an Israeli ID, because I was born and raised in Haifa, because I was not put in a situation that I directly needed to know what the occupation does. We felt it in a different way. We felt it through the schools that we go and the TV channels that we have, the curriculum in the schools that we study, that we have more literature in Hebrew than in Arabic, and all of these things and all of the system and how it works. And I really, for a really long time, I felt disconnected and sort of a stranger. And what happened here is that I felt really, Razan touched on that as well, but I felt that it became Palestinians, and it was not relevant anymore where you're from. It was really irrelevant, because this was, this wasn't just one cause. The cause was not the bombings on Gaza. The cause was not what is happening in the West Bank. The cause, it was, this unified thing. And it was actually really, it's pretty funny that I think about it, but we're used to hear that Palestinians here are 20%. Palestinian here are 20% from the whole population. And this was actually the first time that I realized that we're more than 50%. And it's crazy. I'm 29 years old and I only realized this thing a few months ago. And it's crazy because if you put the people of, inside, it's without even counting Palestinians in al-Shatat, outside of Palestine. It's without counting that, which is crazy. It's counting the West Bank inside the Israeli borders and Gaza. And I think, I don't know, for me, it was overwhelming, first of all, to see Haifa like this, but it was the most important thing because I remember there was one point in one of the demonstration, the crazy big demonstration, I remember the police were chasing us on the sidewalk with their horses, huge horses, Yassam horses, and they were throwing stun grenades and tear gas at us. And we were going hiding inside the restaurants. We were doing the demonstration in a street called Ben Gurion, Jad al-Almanigi, which is one of the main streets in Haifa, and it's full of restaurants, and everything was closed, of course, but we were going to hide in the bisaha of the restaurants, between the tables, and they would chase us with the horses into the restaurants. And there was this car moving with the skunk water. And it was just for a second, like during that demonstration, you had nowhere to go. Like they divided the demonstration in seconds. It was crazy. There were like crazy numbers. But I remember this one point that I was and I was terrified. I felt that, I don't know, he's gonna either run me over with the horse, either the bomb is gonna be hit my head. I don't know. I felt, and for a second I stood like this and I froze and I said, shit, this is what it must feel like to live this. And it was the first time that I actually, experienced it, and it doesn't even come close. That's the crazy part. It doesn't even come close to reality in Gaza. And what I think that we saw in a week, that we had in a few days, that we had doctors and we had nurses and we had people planning events and we had people planning demonstration, and through and even in the shops and the strike and all of that, and it became just in 4 or 5 days we had a whole community, sort of like a very small economic system, but we had everything in just a few days. No planning, nobody said anything, nobody said do this, do that. Each person knew what their role was and went out to the streets and just did it, and it happened in days, and it was crazy. And I think that was very important to all of us to go through this, to be able to continue whatever it is that is happening and what is going to come after that. But yeah, I think and I couldn't touch music at all for almost 2 months. During all of that time, I didn't sing. I sing all the time in the house, and I couldn't sing, I couldn't write, I couldn't do everything. I was on my phone, like you said, and I was in the streets at times that we could go in the streets. And I think really this is just one of the most important things that happened, and the sense of community grew even stronger and stronger. And it excites me, actually. This thing, it's a phase that is really hard, really dangerous, you can say, but it's really exciting because something huge changed, something really big changed.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think, sometimes I feel like what has empowered us all is this sort of like a green light that people got on an individual level, that you don't have to be anyone in specific to fight for something or to speak up or to be part of something, or your identity, let's say as a Palestinian, as an activist, as an artist, does not need verification per se. You can be out of urgency, out of belonging, out of need for expression, because I think in that moment a lot of my friends who would never share anything online were sharing so many things about Palestine because they felt the pain and they felt the urgency to do so. I think that maybe is why there was so much community. And Maysa, you mentioned that you weren't able to sing or write songs or anything during that time. Razan, I would love to hear the both of you reflect on this, but what that means for you. And maybe I also think about the future. Sometimes we can't write or create art in the moment, but we need time. So maybe how art might document this history as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about what Maysa was saying, the unity intifada, right? يعني that was انتفاضة الوحدة. I think I agree, Maysa. يعني we all felt it. And yes, each one of us in our own positionalities has this huge bag of shame and guilt that we deal with. And I think yes, we are constantly kind of being divided up by the system, and we kind of internalize these divisions, whether these divisions happen on the ground, in your case, you know, with the colonial borders, or they happen by like expelling the Palestinian population, and then, you know, and all of me being here, I mean, I was looking at the Palestinians from the camps in Lebanon, kind of running towards the border, and you know, one of them was martyred as well. And I remember like kind of longing to be there, and then talking to a friend, and she was like, Razan, we're in the belly of the beast. Like, we are like right here. This is where a lot of the work, the real work, needs to be done. And so, yeah, I feel like it's very, you know, very easily we could feel kind of disconnected from our own people. One. Two, feel that like also helpless, like we can't kind of be part of the resistance if we're not in the direct line of fire. And this is where like, yeah, I felt like, and you know, Maysa, in your case, and no, when they ask you if, you know, where you're from, and you say Palestinian, it's political, but suddenly the moment you say Palestine, you know, you're on a death row, right? Like, yeah. And no, I thought I was, you know, like you categorize me as Israeli, but the moment you go out of line, they're ready to. I mean, and we can see that through the, you know, the Zionist pogroms that were happening on live Israeli TV. I mean, I thought that was one of the hardest things to look at as well. Just you know, Palestinians being stopped on the street and beaten down live on Israeli television, or, you know, marking Palestinian homes. So I think, you know, that they understand that we are one, and we, you know, and we you know, we have to.
They definitely understand that. That's why they do this whole thing. They definitely know that, and this is like, I think, the scariest thing for them, because the moment we have that, khalas, yani, we can do anything pretty much.
Totally. Yeah, we overpower all these borders, yani, in all the ways, yani, in all the ways. All the ways are necessary in every way. So yeah, I mean, and this is how, you know, here in Quebec, like the moment we had a huge demonstration, kind of like all the huge demonstrations that happened all over the world, and the reaction was like, you know, there's a kind of the reaction was the kind of the scapegoating and the gaslighting that constantly happens towards Palestinians in exile. And so, you know, in our case, because Quebec kind of parrots France, the first reaction was Montreal is a community for everyone, and these anti-Semitic forces must be stopped. And, you know, it's you know, that's a whole other panel on its own, but it's this kind of watering down of what we're trying to do, and gaslighting us, and, you know, again, and having us to kind of react to this gaslighting instead of doing the actual work, which is which is kind of you know, it's political work, and it threatens the structure here, and that's why, you know, in 1 second you're you know, the amount of cameras, the amount of policing that was happening here, tells us that we are also, even when we're here, and I mean, I don't have citizenship here, but I'm sure, you know, all of us have files here now, because of the work that, and it's amazing. Like, we would be, the number of the police would be more than the protesters, yani. And you could see how militarized the police are against us. So so I don't think if you know, the anti-vaxxers, for example, are getting the amount of militarization as we did, for, you know. And anyway, this is all to say that yes, you know, we felt it too, and it's important. There was one thing I wanted to talk to, kind of relate this to art making specifically.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, this is where the co-optation here happens through, to go back to the funding, the resources versus community-based art. This is how they co-opt our work, by kind of creating these systems of production where we depend on institutionalized forms of funding, and so that we depend on resources to make our art, instead of, again, kind of creating more fugitive ways of bringing forth our art to remain political, so that it remains political, it remains radical. Malak was talking about, you know, direct censorship. Okay, this is political, and she was saying, her politicization is very implicit in, you know, so that's her form of kind of undercutting the censorship. Here, I think it's resisting the comfort of settler colonialism. It's resisting the comfort of, you know, this liberal, you know, I remember being invited on a panel, and I was invited with kind of a Zionist artist, and I directly kind of, you know, so they wanted to frame it as this kind of liberal way of, oh, we bring a Palestinian and we bring an Israeli, and they're together.
Two-sided conflict. Yeah,
exactly. So again, and you know, that comes with money, that comes with exposure. But what are we doing here? You know, like, this is, again, like, what why am I making this work? What are my needs? And remembering that, you know, I'm doing this, you know, to, you know, partially because Palestine for me is a liberatory project, and it's speaking to that, you know, liberation that is beyond borders, that can intersect with struggles that are happening here. And, you know, it's also to be one. You know, I understand Maysa, and when you're saying, and no, yes, to be one with my people, even when I've been severed from that connection.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, there are instances where a lot of Palestinian artists felt empowered in this moment because of this oneness, I think, and because of the intersectionality, perhaps, that we got to experience more online. Maybe we can actually talk a little bit about this. We got an audience question about how Palestinian artists can feel supported, or what are the forms of constructive solidarity and allyship that often propel us forward. And I think that's an important conversation, because, you know, it's important to offer Palestinians not only the platform but the lead on this movement of our own liberation. I'd love to hear your perspectives on that as artists and creators, and also more personally as you identify as Palestinians. Maysa, if you want to go first, and then Razan can chime in.
Razan, you want to go first?
Oh, you can go first, Razan, is what they.
Okay.
But Malak.
I don't know. I think for me, this is a question that is kind of tricky, because I'm not sure myself how I handle myself as a Palestinian woman artist. I'm still in the dialogue with that. I'm still between. Wait, I need to plug my computer.
No worries.
Here we go. I think it's really different, depends on which artist you're talking about and where and what is the reality. And I think there's no one question. I think, so if I'm correct, the question was how can we like support the artist as well as the cause itself, صح?
Yeah, or maybe
Pretty much.
personal examples of how you feel supported, like what have
How I
been
feel
examples, or
supported.
if
I
you have
think
an answer to that.
I think in general, speaking about Palestine in general, I think one of the important things as well that there were a lot of positive things being shared on social media. And not only the killing and not only the crying and not only that, which is a huge part, but I feel, I think a lot of us feel that we're not even portrayed in a human way. We're portrayed solely in a victim way. And this is, and this is how we're put out there. And I think it's really, really important because this is a big part of Palestinians. Palestinians have this huge fire in them and the hospitality and the dancing and the this and that. And I think the events showed us a lot of the will of the Palestinian will of the Palestinian people of everything, and especially because every person took it to his own place, even artists and non-artists alike. And I think that's one of the most important things, is to talk about it not as a cause, to talk about it as people. And I think that the vision applies to every cause that we talk about around the world, because we're so used to seeing images of African kids crying or starving, but we don't see the other side of Africa. We're used to seeing the pictures here of Gaza and the ruins and all of that, which is very important to talk about. I'm not saying it's not important, but we don't see enough of the people. And when we're talking about people that don't really care too much about the cause, they're not like, this is not what they're going to be connected to. And I think it's really important that we humanize ourselves, first of all. People in general, not only Palestinians, also in Africa, and also in Yemen, and also in Syria, and also in every place. We need to talk about each other as people that have a lot of layers. That's one. And not only the suffering. And I think when we talk about art, it depends on the artist, because for me, I'm still trying to realize if I even have the separation between Maysa and the daily life and Maysa the musician, and I'm still trying to figure it out, because it's a pain in the ass, honestly, because you don't know, you become 16, 17, 18 whenever you start doing music or whenever you start doing arts, and the first thing is asking, like, what do you want to say to the world? Or who are you? Or define yourself. And as a 17-year-old, you're not sure what you are. So we take these questions or these patterns that we're used to, and we start building our own personality upon that. In my case, at least, that's what I felt. And I think it's important to listen to, or to hear, or to buy art from artists, not because only they are women or they are Palestinian or they are this or they are that. It's important to support, but it's also very important for us to feel that this is not why we are being, nashhin. How do you say that? I forget the word. Because for me, it's very frustrated that I get invited all around the world, but I get there and people don't even know my music, and I feel, that I'm just a tool here, and I don't want to feel that I'm a tool, because I'm not a tool. I'm a musician, I'm a woman, I'm a Palestinian, but that's not all I am. These are two things of what makes me a person, and it's important to speak about these things as well. And as for, if people want to help directly, so it's really important to find places that are true, that are Palestinians, that are not someone taking money from here and bring it to them. No, if you want to support, if you want to put money, or if you want to send something or whatever it is, make
Resources,
sure that you research it, because a lot of people are riding the wave in causes all around the world, but people are really good with riding the wave and just, saying that. So a really good research is very appreciated, and help locally and shop locally and support Palestinian businesses and support local businesses and small businesses and paintings and arts in general and everything and tatreez and all of that. And I think that's why I said there's no one way to answer this question for me, because there are so many layers. And I think the main thing is acknowledging that there are a lot of layers into this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hope that answered something.
No, akid, a lot. And I think my favorite part of what you just shared is the part about, Maysa as you and Maysa as the artist, and separating that out. But also, when you interact with community, whether, they interact with you solely as a Palestinian or as Maysa, who created this art that takes years, and, who's also figuring out who she is and how to express that. And I think that's what I was trying to talk about at the beginning, of how we become almost, politicized on purpose by external forces, when you're just there trying to present your personal and human story. Razan, how do you feel about that as a filmmaker, artist, activist, especially in Montreal, or being outside of Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the neoliberal settler colonial structure kind of appropriates work. It creates kind of like هيدا buffet, buffet of international artists, and kind of tasting, it's kind of like how food is, speaking of buffets, how food also as culture is appropriated. It's just kind of extracted, commodified, and then just consumed as like other. And that's how it gets completely, like, when you separate the art from the people and the land, it becomes an object, and art is not an object. This is purely Western colonial. This is how colonialism started, with the artifacts, right? Like, that were stolen from different African lands. I mean, so separating the object from its people and its land. So I feel like the same here happens when just like Maysa said, and when we're instrumentalized for, and when identity becomes this label, instead of being all the life world that it is, like all these years you spent writing that song, or all that. I totally feel you. Like, the first film I made, like, I felt like, I was maybe 28 at the time or something, and I felt like, okay, 28 years I've been thinking about this film. And it طلع. So and this is where, like, speaking of this film, I remember, and I didn't know how to strategically distribute it, right? Like, wait for the premiere in that big festival. No, it was a friend, Nihat Khader, who was curating for DC Palestinian Film Festival and Black Star Film Festival. And, she curated the film at TPFF when it got then, curated in all the other Palestinian film festivals, and Palestinian film festivals in the independent Haifa, Haifa Film Festival, the Cinema Days in Ramallah and Nablus, and and then it went to bigger festivals and whatnot. So this is where, like, and to speak to also Black Star Film Festival, and this is what TPFF is doing as well. They're constantly thinking about Black cinema and intersectionally with Palestinian cinema and indigenous cinema. Like, they understand that we, our struggle is one as well, and we are the majority. Yes, totally. More expansively so, and I mean. and our power is in our collectivity. So yes, I think, again, thinking about these barriers as, would I drop the word, the barriers as blessings? And no, because these barriers actually are just like obstacles to being appropriated, taking that art and like globalizing it. What does that do? Okay, and it gives you, so this is where, but at the same time, I feel like this has to be balanced with not making sure that we're not kind of creating our bubbles, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where, like, BLM, for example, Black Lives Matter movement last summer really broke out of that, went out in the street and demonstrated, and this kind of also gave us the platform as Palestinians this summer after that to also break out of that and go out in the streets in the big numbers, and already prepared for the kind of militarization, militarized police that was because if you think about these military polices everywhere, they share the same weapons, they share the same training, and it's Israeli made and it's US made. And it's Canada made. The second exporter of weapons worldwide is Canada. So I think it's important to, and art washing is part and parcel of this. I need to name it. Like I'm talking about something, but the keyword here is art washing. So yes, art washing. It's part and parcel of the settler colonial machine, and I feel like, being in this conversation with Maysa and Malak and Mariam, and being part of TPFF, thank you, Dania and Naji, like, yes, and no, this is where I think these spaces need to happen so that we feel supported, so that we kind of, but at the same time, start here, and then I think if we are, again, if we're collective enough, if we're in, together enough, this is where we break out of that, space that we've created for ourselves into a more mainstream space. But we're already contextualized. We're already kind of protecting each other. So it's different. It's different than, the system just kind of picking you out. Oh, you made a film. Let me take it and just put it out there. It's which Maysa also talked about, and yes, it totally happens all the time. And yes, you need to do your research too. But it happens, and you're caught by surprise, and it's not a nice experience at all.
I want to actually add two things, if I can, about the question itself. I think, oh wow, what was the first thing that I wanted to say?
Okay.
Oh wow, it flew right
I had to
out
take
of
your
my mind.
time.
But the second point that I wanted to say is that I think one of the important things to actually talk about is I don't believe that what happened and what is still happening here in Palestine is relevant only to Palestine. I think we also, like, this movement became bigger and bigger and bigger because of other movements around the world. And the question was, what can we do to support that? I think, like, one of the major things that happened in the last events is that we got support of a lot of people from the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that's huge, because you cannot talk about Palestine and not talk about Black lives, and cannot talk about Palestine and not talk about the indigenous people, and you cannot talk about this and not talk about Syria, and you cannot talk about feminism without talking, what is happening to women here, and and all of that. And there's a lot of layers. And I think one of the things I remember talking a lot about with my friend during the events is that something huge is happening, but it's not only local. And this movement is really, it's worldwide, and it should be more worldwide. And this is, I think, what we need to understand. I'm not saying to put everything in one label. It's really important to talk about each story as it is, but it's important to understand that we cannot get peace here if they don't get peace there, and they cannot get peace there if we do not get peace here, because it's the same thing, it's the same system, it's the same thing. And if we really want to make a big change, we need to be supportive of each other in the movement and be really aware of the words that we use to describe either anything, you know, the people and the events themselves and how we call it, and if we call it Israel or the occupation, or if we call it this and that. It's really important to use the right words, because words go other than the ears, but they go into our subconscious, and that makes the whole difference, you know. If you say something is a struggle, or if you say that this is a cause, it's really different of how you act to it. As a person, as a Palestinian, if I say that this is a cause or this is a struggle, it changes the way I react to it without me even realizing this. And I think it's really important to choose our words really wisely. And I remember the part that I did that actually connects to this is that we need to be aware of how this system, whether the American or the Israeli, or I put them all in one place because it's the same. And we need to be aware of how they manipulate us. And that's what I realized, you know, when the 6 prisoners escaped the prison. There was when they caught the first 2. So they said that there was an Arab family in Nazareth that actually called the police and told them about these. And actually 2 of the prisoners said afterwards that it wasn't true, because they were not going inside the villages and the Arab towns. But I remember that I was watching the news, and when they said an Arab family, I was like, what? How can they do this? How can the Arab family do that? And I got so pissed, you know, that we got such a long way, and suddenly like Arab. And then I said, Maysa, wait, you were watching the news, the Israeli news all the time during the events, and you know that every single thing that they put in the news was fake and was lies. And I knew that, so it got me pissed. But now, in that specific event with the prisoners, I didn't know the truth, and I actually believed them. And I actually believe them when I know it's in my system that it's all lies. So we need to be aware of that as well. And we need to be aware specifically about Palestine of the methods that the Israeli government uses, like making Tel Aviv the capital for LGBTQ plus community, and making, you know, the huge parade so you say, oh, it's so gay friendly and all of that. But then they don't talk about how they take LGBTQ people from the West Bank and bring them here and tell them you have to work with us, or else we're going to send you back to your family and you're going to be killed. And they actually use the pinkwashing and all of that, and they use it to put such a good image of themselves in the world. But at the same time, they actually use and threaten. They go pick them, and they threaten people from Palestine while they are doing this whole staging thing of making everything look so colorful and so pink and so nice. So we need to be aware of that, first of all. And I think the moment we are aware of that, it clears up a lot of the actions that we need to take after it. And to also realize that this takes time. So to not lose hope, this takes time. We started something huge and really important, and it's going to take us time, but we're going there, definitely going there.
100%, absolutely. We always say, you know, hopefully freedom and liberation in our lifetime, but if not, at least we build for the lifetime to come. And so, yes, you have patience is, you know, a tool of resistance. And, you know, both of you have said really, really important points. And maybe this is, you know, how we wrap up. But, you know, our intersection with our own liberation is, as you said, so much more expansive when it's intersectional. We all feel like minorities because the systems of oppression are supposed to keep us feeling isolated in minorities. But then what Maysa said is that once we started connecting with community, with art, with our talents, whatever it may be, we broke those boundaries and we felt more expansive and well placed. And I think that's such a big highlight of the moment we all experienced. And we definitely had digital and online tools that were available to us because of the Black Lives Movement that happened the summer before.
Definitely.
We definitely built upon that, and it has to be acknowledged. Definitely. And I think I'm so thankful to have shared this space with the both of you, with Mariam and with Malak. And we have so much more work to do. And so long as we're trying, I hope we can build more and more. So yeah, thank you, Maysa. Thank you, Razan. If you have anything else to say, please feel free to do so in this moment. And then Dania will take over from TPFF and wrap us up.
I just want to say thank you, and thank you so much for everybody involved here. And I want to thank the audience for being here and being interested in listening. And we really appreciate it. And hopefully, only good things to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Maysa.
Well, thank you to all of you for joining us. It was a real honor to get a chance to hear your insights on this really important topic. And we welcome these conversations at TPFF, and we definitely know it won't be the last conversation we have, because everyone's highlighted how important it is that we reflect on these issues and put out our perspectives and our expectations out there for the world. So yeah, again, thank you for your time. For those who are interested in seeing Razan's latest work, I think it's the latest work, Canada Park is part of our festival this year. It's part of the On This Land Shorts Film Program. So it's available online. I think the screening happened today. So if you missed today's screening in theater, you can still go onto our website, tpff.ca, and watch the film as part of this collection of short films, which is, again, called On This Land. And again, it's been an honor to have Maysa with us in Toronto, and we hope to see her again. And definitely in the comment section, you can find out all about their work. You can go to their Instagram pages and their websites. Please follow them. Please support their work. They're doing amazing work in their respective fields, and it's always a joy and a pleasure to experience the art that they create. So thank you, everyone. There are a few tickets left for Sahtain. We just got the latest update. They're selling out quick, so be sure to get the Sahtain Deluxe tickets as soon as you can. If you have missed any programming, if you've missed any films, not to worry. They are still online at tpff.ca. So all the great films that have happened over the last couple of days, you can still access through the website, as well as our wonderful talks. So, merci awi, shukran. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and we hope to chat again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.